If you've seen my other Paper Mario videos, you've probably noticed that I primarily play the Japanese version. I'll use the English version sometimes, but most of the time, both while I'm playing casually and when I'm recording for a video, I play Japanese. And that's because it's the better version. Not by a huge amount, most of the changes aren't that big of a deal, you probably won't care that much, but they're enough for it to be my preferred version. So I'm going to go over the differences between the three main versions of the game. I'm not just reciting the cutting room floor page either, because there's some stuff that's not even properly documented there. So let's get to the changes. Real quick though, there's a lot of text changes between the Japanese, American, and European English versions, but I'll go over them later. I want to talk about the other stuff first. Also, disclaimer on screen real quick. Okay. The first difference between versions is right at the start of the game. In the international versions, after the unskippable N64 logo, there's the red Nintendo logo, then the Intelligent Systems logo, before going to the actual title screen. But on the Japanese version, not only is the Nintendo and Intelligent Systems logo on the same screen, making the whole section shorter, but you can also skip through it, which is really nice. What really confuses me is that, like, if it was swapped the other way around, so that way you can skip it on the US version but not the Japanese version, yeah, whatever, they made it better. But why did Nintendo of America go out of their way to make the whole sequence longer and then forced me to sit through it every time? I probably had to sit through this whole section for an hour or two of my life if you combine every time I've started the game. The Nintendo logo is also blue in the Japanese version, which is really weird. The only other place I've seen it blue is the Thousand Year Door intro. Honestly, just this is enough for me to prefer the Japanese version. Every time I have to play English for one reason or another, it's just a chore sitting here for 10 seconds every time I start the game, which can be multiple times a session. I really don't get why they did this. Anyways, after the first 10 seconds, there's also another difference, and that's that the game's logo was completely redone for the US version. And this is one of the very few things that the US version actually does better. The crumpled paper background with the colorful Mario text is way better in my opinion than a random 3D sphere with drop shadow text. Though I guess I'm not one to talk. The game's name is also different between versions. In Japan, the first two Paper Mario games are called Mario Story. Then in the European version, there's an added language select option with a sound that I think is unique to it too. This is my first time ever playing the European version, and hopefully the last. I don't want this 50Hz garbage. The differences on the title screen aren't done yet though. I hope you're not bored. I'm not. This stuff is really interesting to me, because when you go to name your save file, the keyboard is really different. Obviously the Japanese version has Japanese characters, but the buttons are also stacked vertically instead of horizontally, and there's 2 extra buttons on the top only in the Japanese one. The top button makes the keyboard have hiragana characters, and the bottom one switches to katakana with a really bad looking swipe transition. Instead of having the swipe go across the entire keyboard, each character gets their own swipe, and it honestly just hurts my head to watch. No such swipe or keyboard switchers in any other version, though the European version does have all the accented characters, no matter your language. And then the back button is now an arrow for some reason, and for some reason the space button is just gone. It's just not there, though the not empty space works as a space button at least. And because of course there's more differences, the Japanese version has a tilde, circle, exclamation mark, and a question mark that aren't in the international keyboards, though we do at least get the hyphen, music note, heart, star, and @ symbol. Finally, after getting into the game, the pause menus are also pretty different. There's some really minor stuff like the X's being moved to the right a little, same with the boots and hammer and whatnot, but the first tab in the Japanese version says Mario instead of stats. It's a little hard to tell, but the numbers were also redesigned between versions for some reason. The US ones are a little better looking, I guess, but I don't see why this had to be done, to be honest. And then heading to the item screen, in the Japanese version there's 2 items per row, but only 1 in all other versions. This was probably done because stuff made up in the Latin alphabet, like English words, are normally longer than Japanese words, so they need more space to fit the longer text. Just look at the 3rd degree card. Even if it makes sense that I had to go to 1 item per row, I still like having a 2-wide grid for items. It just makes the menu look way nicer. 926 words into the script, and I'm finally done talking about menus. For some more interesting stuff, the new partner song is completely different in the international versions. It was most likely changed because the Japanese version's melody sounds just like America from West Side Story. I can't play it because copyright, but listening to them side by side, yeah, I hear it. I don't know if this was an intentional reference where Nintendo of America just didn't want to risk the lawsuit, or if it was a coincidence, or what. Either way, here's the 2 versions side by side. I do like the later parts of the US version more, but when I'm actually playing the game, I'm holding down B the entire time, so I only ever hear the intro, and the Japanese intro does sound better. When you get to Toad Town, the sign is changed in the international versions to say Toad Town instead of Kinoko Town, which is what toads are called in Japanese. It was also made to be more saturated. In Chapter 2, the theme for Mount Rugged also had some instruments get changed. The difference is kinda small. I wouldn't blame people for not noticing, but I do slightly prefer the Japanese version because the main instrument in the international version is kind of annoying, even if it is the more nostalgic one. The international versions really nerfed Taste Tea. Baking a mushroom with a Koopa leaf, Goomnut, or Strange Leaf would make a life shroom in the Japanese version. But then they changed it so it's just a Volt shroom. I get it. Mushrooms are 5 coins and Goomnuts are free. So you could get life shrooms for 5 coins in Chapter 4, which is way too overpowered. But why'd you have to go and ruin my fun? Objectively speaking, yeah, it's probably for the better because balancing and this and that, but I don't care. I like my Paper Mario games broken. Also rip anyone who bought the official strategy guide, it lied to you. Then there's not any non-dialogue changes till Chapter 5, where there's a different song for when Yoshi Village is in panic. And this one isn't properly documented in most places. The US version of the song changes the instruments in the intro and adds percussion to get rid of the weird silence. Though after the intro, the songs are the same. Gold Lungs were changed from dropping jelly shrooms in the Japanese version to ultra shrooms elsewhere. Honestly a nerf considering FP is more important than HP. Then in Chapter 8, there's a good amount of music differences. In Bowser's Castle, there's 5 different background songs that are used throughout, those being the themes to Floor 1, Floor 2, Floor 3, the Dark Rooms, and the exterior to Floor 2. In the international versions, one of the main instruments that's used in all of the songs was changed completely, and it just sounds bad. It goes from more of a blah sound to like a tink. That sounds really stupid to say out loud, but just listen. And for some reason, I don't really know why. In the international versions, during the intro to all the songs except for the 3rd floor, the percussion is really delayed, and it only starts playing after it's already done in the Japanese version. Maybe this is done to ease into the rest of the song better, I don't know. And if you played the US version but the Japanese version sounds more familiar, most rips of this game are from the Japanese version, including the official CD, so that's probably why. And by the way, if you want to listen to any of these songs in full, I have a comparison video in the description. And for the final non-text difference, while the US version has gotten a few minor wins here and there, this is the only one that really matters and makes me second guess playing Japanese. In the international version of the final battle theme, they replaced a few instruments, most notably adding an electric guitar and having it play at a lower octane, which completely transforms the song. The Japanese final battle theme honestly isn't that good, but the changes for the US version makes it one of my favorite themes from any game. So now for the text changes. As you can imagine, between the Japanese to English translation, then the European localization on top of that, there's a lot of text changes, and I'm not going to go over every single little thing like I did for the other changes, like how in the intro they moved a period in the European version, only the actually interesting things. I'll also try to show the text in-game as much as I can, but there might be a line or two that I can't. I don't know, I'll have to see when I edit the video. In Koopa Village, the English-European text for this bob-omb was changed. Apparently, the European version is a copy and paste from some other text, but I looked around and I couldn't find where it originally came from, so I don't know. The other languages kept the original text. In the Japanese version, there's a text box that appears whenever an enemy heals themselves or heals someone else saying what happened, but that text just doesn't exist in the US version, so there's just a random pause whenever an enemy heals, though this was at least fixed for all languages in the European version. I just don't get how this happened. Maybe if an empty box appeared instead, it would have been easier to spot instead of the game just not showing a box. But even I noticed that fights would just randomly pause sometimes in battle before I read about this. I get quality control for localized stuff, which just sucked back in the day, but come on. The Koopa Legends book in the Japanese version has pictures of women on it. It's a fitness book in America. Similarly, they also made Goombario less attracted to older girls. In the Japanese version, translated, he says, "I'm such a sucker for older girls." But then culture differences and whatnot, and yeah, he still has a preference in the English version, but he doesn't outright say it. Instead, saying stuff like, "She makes me see stars," or "I think I'm in love, she's incredible." During the rematch with Junior Troopa, he misspells his own name, which is kind of funny. British Junior Troopa is smart enough to spell though, and British Mario isn't nearly as sleepy as American Mario when listening to Koopa Koot. And speaking of him, in the Japanese version, Koopa Koot only says 2 things whenever you finish something for him. But in the English version, he says something different every time you bring something back to him. At least I think it's every time. I don't know, I didn't finish the full thing. When you cancel out of having Taste Tea cook you something, in the English version it says "don't cook" and "cook," but in the Japanese version it's just a generic yes and no box. Which is weird to me because if you're gonna go through the effort to change this menu to be a unique yes or no, why not also change the other text boxes to be cook and don't cook, because they still say yes and no. This one is a little infamous, but the Japanese version doesn't use any pronouns for what during the upgrade block because you don't need them in this context, I guess. So the translators who were doing this part saw that Watt had a blue pacifier and just assumed that Watt was a boy, which she isn't. Everywhere else the translators correctly said she, so it just results in Watt switching genders mid-game in the English version. Even 2007 Nintendo of America saw a blue pacifier and just assumed it meant boy and did the same thing in Super Paper Mario. They also misread this letter for Goombario, but they misread this as this, and now it's from his mom in the English version. Though they did at least fix this sign saying that this Boo is from Boo House to say Bo's Mansion in the English versions, because Boo House is an earlier name for Bo's Mansion and they just forgot to go back and fix it in the Japanese version, I guess. The title for the Chapter 8 bullet bills in the Japanese version, when translated, says, "Because their explosion power is boosted, take heed of their HP value," which basically means they're stronger and have more health, watch out. But the English translators took this to mean that their attack power is higher when they're at low HP, which just isn't true. It would be a cool boss idea though. And for the final dialogue change, this sign at the end of the game in the Japanese version refers to your partners by their species, not by their name, but in the English version they changed it to say their names. So instead of "he fought beside Goombas," it's "he fought beside Goombario." But they forgot to do the same to Bo, so the person writing the sign refers to Lady Bo as Lady Boo, which if you don't know the context, also just looks like a typo. I remember watching a video where someone pointed out that they called her Lady Boo when I was in like 4th grade, and honestly, I forgot her name was Bo and was really confused because I'm an idiot. There isn't any point in me telling the story, it just brought back a memory of dumb child me. Anyways, this is the part of the video that I think is the most interesting, and that's location names. I swear, this is interesting. A lot of areas in the Japanese version are named off of areas from other Mario games, but the English translators didn't know that and they just renamed them. Shooting Star Summit was originally named after Star Hill from Mario RPG, Dry Dry Desert was named after Calamari Desert from Mario Kart 64, Shiver Mountain was named after Cool Cool Mountain from Mario 64, and Star Way was named after Shiver Mountain from Mario RPG and Mario World. For Dry Dry Desert, even with the name change, there still are enough connections to Calamari Desert that you can fairly assume there's a connection. The train that takes you to Mount Rugged is the same train, and the train theme is even a remix of Calamari Desert's theme song. But for the others, it's really lame that such an interesting thing was taken away from us. I was playing Mario 64 DS around the same time I was playing Paper Mario as a kid, and if I saw that for Chapter 7 we were going to Cool Cool Mountain, I would have freaked out. Even today, before I saw this, I would wonder a lot what else is on the CCM Mountain, just for the answer to be there, and I just didn't know. I always really like it when games have a reused area from another game to anchor where the two worlds are relative to each other, like the dam in Half-Life Opposing Force or the intro to Blue Shift. It's fun to drive through Calamari Desert thinking that somewhere off in the distance is Dry Dry Ruins and Dry Dry Outpost. It's kinda sad that we never got to experience this elsewhere in the world. And for the final difference, there's a good amount of changes for Chuck Quizmo. For question 1, what's Goombario's name? One of the wrong questions in the Japanese version is
Christine,
which later became the name of Goombella in the Japanese version of the Thousand Year Door. The same thing happened in question 19, where it'll ask for Koopa Koot's name, and one of the incorrect questions is
Nokotaro,
which became Koopa Koot's Japanese name. Same can't be said for question 7, where you can say that the leader of the red and blue Goombas is the sweet mashed potatoes. Question 32 asks who lives in Forever Forest, with Cleft originally saying Tubba Blubba. If I had to guess, since Tubba Blubba lives in Gusty Gulch, which is connected to Forever Forest, maybe it was too confusing for kids? I don't know. Question 45 is a play on words that doesn't make sense when translated, and that I'm too American to understand. And for some reason, answer 60 asks which best describes Mario and Luigi's relationship. Neighbors, friends, or brothers? Unless you're Japanese, where instead of neighbors, you can say lovers, which was changed because, obviously. And not counting any non-interesting text changes, that's everything. I first wrote a Paper Mario version script back in late 2020, but I was too much of an idiot at the time to see this big box saying, here is the text changes, so the entire script was only like a page long and it would have been like a 2-minute video, so I never ended up making it. But just like my last video, I was like, hey, I should do a shorter video. Oh, this would be cool, not too long. But then here I am with a script that's 1.5 times bigger than the Star Spirit video, whoops. Anyways though, bye.